Today's video is going to discuss the difference between standing and walking on your hands, so you can understand that they are different skills, and when you're training one versus the other, you can understand a little bit more of the methodology that you want to use, and in doing so, you can have a clear intent of what you're trying to do. So the reason I'm making this video is because I got a comment recently from somebody saying, walking on my hands is easy, do you have any tips for me to be able to balance? So I have a lot of tips, but I try not to give general tips because tips should be specific to the individual, but I do have some thoughts on the overall concept that I think will help you understand the difference between walking and balancing on your hands. So in regards to my own personal practice, I was actually walking for about a year before I really learned to balance, right? I started off by just kicking and falling over for a long time, and then I learned how to take a couple steps, how to adjust myself, and then from there I basically learned how to walk forwards and backwards. Forward is a bit easier, and I was able to walk with a reasonable amount of control without being able to do any kind of balancing on my hands. That came later after I learned how to use the wrists and the fingers. So it's important to note this is they are completely different skills, and it's good not to mesh them into the same category, and I'll explain why. So the idea is when you're walking, and essentially walking on your feet is not that much different, it's just different concepts are exaggerated. But when I teach walking on the hands, I think of it like a constant fall. You're never really balanced in one place, you're always falling. And if I'm walking forwards, for example, what I'm doing is I'm allowing myself to go off balance forwards, and I put my foot under me as I continue to fall. So it's a controlled fall, and then I catch myself after I fall. If I'm walking backwards, same thing. I'm standing, I allow myself to fall, I take a step, and if I continue falling, I can keep taking steps underneath my center of gravity, and that allows me to continue walking. I don't need to really be able to balance for this because I can just roll with my momentum. Now, what gets a little bit more complicated, and I'll go into more details with that, is when I'm walking in place, because that's actually a progression that I use a lot when I teach handstand walks. When I'm walking in place, I'm actually falling from side to side, so it's like a pendulum. So when I do this, I'm still never completely balanced, and then eventually what the handstand walk ends up being, just to give you that conceptual understanding, is I'm falling from side to side, and I'm falling forwards, and I'm falling backwards, but the idea is always allowing myself to fall, and it's the fall that sets up the movement, and then I react afterwards. I fall, and then I take my steps. Now, when I balance, this is completely the opposite, and that's why oftentimes people can walk with a lot of control, a lot of distance, and don't have a good control of balance, is because when you balance, or again, just to be specific to the context of handstands, I'm catching myself before I fall. So this is what's happening when I'm balancing on my feet and my hands. I have this kind of center position where it's my equilibrium, where I can feel my vertical alignment. And as I start to tilt, I'll catch myself and pull it back. And right now I'm doing this with the feet because I'm standing up. But that's what a balanced handstand ends up being, is you have awareness of where you are, and then you catch yourself before you fall, as opposed to walking when you catch yourself after you fall. So the actual balance compared to walking, and one of the reasons that it's more difficult to learn is because, number one, you have to react sooner, number two, you have to react a lot faster, and number three, the reactions have to be a lot smaller and more precise. So it takes more skill, in my opinion. Not that walking doesn't take skill, but it takes more skill to learn to balance because of those factors. So this is enough theory, so I do want to get into just a couple practical demonstrations of that. So a little bit of practical demonstration. These are a couple concepts that I think about when I teach and when I train to help me separate the idea of walking and balance. So first, I don't have a ton of space to demonstrate, but when I walk, whether it's forwards or backwards, I think about maintaining this constant rhythm from one hand to the other, or it fits in place. I guess I don't really have enough room to walk forwards and backwards, but when I walk in place, I can do a little bit of forwards and backwards. This is the idea.
right? I'm always going from one side to the other, so I'm always falling side to side a certain amount. But what I try not to do when I walk, I try not to stay in one place. So it's like it's kind of like the ground is hot lava theme, where I'm not really trying to go that fast, and I can moderate the amplitude and the speed of the shifts, but I'm always shifting weight from hand to hand, and I want that to be consistent. And interesting, one parallel I've made from watching stilt walkers, now I can't confirm it because I haven't actually had practice walking on stilts, but when I see somebody on stilts, they have this constant shifting back and forth. So it's the same idea when I'm walking, whether it's forwards, backwards, sideways, etc. I don't want to stay. I want to always keep moving, and the better that I can move within that certain rhythm, that's going to help me maintain the control of my walk. And then again, if I'm in place, I just try to keep the equilibrium. If I'm walking forwards, all I do is tilt my weight ever so slightly in that direction. Same thing when I go backwards. Okay, so when I balance and when I teach balance, I talk about the grip, and I have other videos on this that you can check out, but basically most of your balance comes from the wrist and the fingers. There is some balancing you can do with your shoulders, elbows, etc., but this should be the main focus, wrist and fingers. And the idea is that you catch yourself before you fall, and it's this back and forth. You're always making adjustments, but you're making small adjustments to stay in the same place. So the main difference between how I balance versus how I walk, when I balance, I'm going to activate the hands and activate the grip because that's my control. When I walk, it's actually quite the opposite. I keep my hands relaxed. I roll through the fingers when I step, but I don't actively grip, because if I were to actively grip when I walk, to me it feels like I'm cutting off the movement. It feels like I have the gas and brake on at the same time in my car. So when I balance, see what the frame is, I'm always using my wrists and my fingers. I don't really know how well you can see that, but the idea is that I'm making these forwards and backwards adjustments, and I'm maintaining that grip, and it's that grip on the floor that allows me to continue that control. And as I mentioned, I can be a lot sloppier with my adjustments when I walk on my hands because I'm already falling, so I can just fall and correct it more. But when I'm actually balancing on my hands, I have to be a lot more precise. So what ends up happening is I'm making several corrections per second through my hands, and I'm doing this to maintain my body in a certain alignment. Now notice I did a little bit of a shoulder, right? So I can do these corrections to balance, but ultimately the body should be relatively still, and most of the corrections should be happening from here. But those are the main differences when I walk versus when I balance, is the constant movement versus the stability, and then the grip, on versus off. I find if you make those distinctions, it's going to help a lot, and then you don't confuse the two. Because what I don't like to see when I'm teaching is walking to catch yourself, right? Someone's trying, because then the intention isn't clear, is what it comes down to. So somebody is trying to balance, they walk, and then they balance, and they walk. Now, I'm not saying never do this. It's not a bad thing necessarily to do, because you're fighting for your balance and you're teaching yourself to hold it longer, but you're also teaching yourself to fall and then correct yourself. And what if you were on an apparatus, on canes? You don't always have the option to be able to fall and then catch yourself. Sometimes you have to maintain the same position. So, and you can eventually, when you have both, there are drills you can do, you know how well, so you can balance, take a couple steps, and then catch your balance again, right? So those, not the cleanest demonstration, but those are drills that you can do later on because they work both elements, right? You're working on balancing and holding, then you let yourself fall, take a couple steps, then brake check yourself and catch it. But that's really important, is to have that clear intention. Am I trying to stay, or am I trying to walk and move? And you don't want to be confused between those two. You want to be very clear what you want to do, and then do the
the cues, the body positions, the thoughts that you need to do in order to maintain that clear intention. Because yeah, if I see someone balancing, walking around, balancing, and it's chaotic, I don't know what you're trying to do. And if I don't know what you're trying to do, I don't know if you know what you're trying to do either. So I hope that makes sense, that idea of clarifying to yourself what you're trying to do and doing the necessary actions to accommodate that. So going back to the original question that basically prompted me making this video is, I can walk on my hands. Any tips on learning how to balance? The main tip that I'm going to give, and probably people aren't going to like to hear it, is more than likely you have to go back to the wall, which I know it sucks. It feels like you're taking steps back, but you're not. You're actually learning the thing you need to learn within the right context that will help you to actually develop that sensation. So what you need to do is, number one, learn how to use the hands and grip, and I have a video on this called Priming the Hands for Balance. If you do that before your balance sessions, not only is that a good wrist and hand warm-up, but you're going to start to understand those cues and those sensations and those corrections. Number two, you probably have to go back to the wall, or chest to the wall, or both, and learn how to balance next to the wall without going anywhere. Learning how not to kick off the wall. Again, I have videos on this. I have courses. You don't want to kick or push off the wall. You want to use the hands to take the weight, so you feel that you have this control of pushing your body and pulling it forwards and backwards only through your wrists, and then eventually you use that as a reaction towards where you're falling, and you find that balance. The wall is there just to help you know where you are, but you want to use it minimally, right? Chest to wall, try to find a good space for that, right? Same thing. I use the hands to come off the wall. I hold it a couple seconds. I come back. I can go here, right? The standard wall scissor drill. But if you're walking and you have trouble balancing and it looks like chaos, that's my recommendation. Learn how to grip with the hands. Go back to the wall, or go to the wall, maybe you never used the wall in the first place, and do these drills until you understand the concept. And then the other thing that you should do is kick up and understand how to stop your kick up in the right place so that your entry also allows you to catch the balance. Because one more difference that I didn't talk about, when I'm walking, I'm already separating my hands. So if I'm kicking up into a handstand walk, I usually kick like that, where I start on one hand and I'm already starting the rhythm, because I don't want to confuse myself if I'm balancing or not. I want to already go into the back and forth. So, but that being said, if I'm doing a kick up for a walk, I can fall out of the kick up, because that can initiate my walk, but I have to know the precision. So other than the balance drills, make sure you're working just these basic kick-up drills where you understand exactly how much force and momentum you need to stop in the handstand and maintain that control. I have a video on kick-ups as well that I think you will find useful. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts. Alright, so I hope this video was helpful. Just a few thoughts that I have on how to understand the difference between walking and balancing on your hands, and how to apply that in your practice so you can develop those two separate skills, and then eventually you have complete control and you can decide whether you want to walk and in what direction you want to walk, or whether you want to balance and stay still. So let me know if it's helpful. You can give me a like, share, subscribe. All of that helps. If you have any intention of helping me out financially, I have ebooks and courses that I sell. I offer private training. I offer in-person seminars. So those are all potential avenues if you want to learn more. Other than that, I really appreciate all my subscribers. Thank you for watching, and let me know what else you'd like to see.